Some folks will like you and some that just won't. Some that stay real and some that just don't. Trying to fit in will only take you so far. You'll never find home trying to change who you are. So don't spend your whole life trying to be what you ain't. Can't hide your heart with a new coat of paint. You think they'll accept you, I promise they can't. It's just be who you are, forget what they think. So just be who you are and forget what they think.
Welcome to Vet with a Mic, content driven by veterans issues. So today we're going to talk to Travis, former Marine, who has found life after the uniform pretty rewarding because he works with Oscar Mike Radio. I guess technically he's the founder of Oscar Mike Radio. And he has found an additional pursuit within Equestrian Therapy, a founder of the Wild Hearts organization. I guess a board member.
Board member, yes.
Yeah, forgive me. And we're going to find out a little bit about Travis today, and hopefully we'll find out exactly what Wild Hearts is all about. So how you doing today, buddy?
I'm savage, Ryan. 100.
I of course, a Marine would be savage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit of your time in the uniform, man. I'm always curious to see how the hell people ended up in the uniform. So what was the young Travis's decision to go into the uniform?
Well, I got out of high school and tried college, and I thought, college was too hard. So, I'll join the Marine Corps. That's a pretty good, idea.
That's easy. The Marine Corps.
Yeah. I mean, how could that? And I think in the first 12 minutes at San Diego, I figured out real quick I might have oversimplified that a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, you mean the recruiter didn't tell you the truth? Who would have thought?
No. And so I went through boot camp and got out and got into air defense artillery through the Hawk missile system. And so at the time, it was a medium range surface to air missile system. And I was in the air wing, but not really in the air wing because we did grunt stuff too. But, it was a very unique MOS, for the Marine Corps and in general. And then, to tell you how messed up things got, I got to my MOS school at Fort Bliss and they said, "Hey, Hawk's going away." I'm like, no way. The Marine Corps wouldn't put you into a job when they knew that job was going away. And guess what? 18 months later, yeah, they did. And they started decommissioning the system. It was replaced by the Army's Patriots. So when it was time for me to re-up, I'm like, I'm not going to give Uncle Sam another chance with my life. I think I'm just going to, move on into life. And there's some other things going on too, right? So I got out of the Marine Corps, and the thing is, I told a recruiter this a month ago, I would have stayed in. I love the MOS. Watching that missile leave the launcher and go after the target 40 miles away and doing target engagement, and you're in the field doing technical work, but you're also a Marine too. It's just a very cool thing. Even now, like, what'd you do in the Marine Corps? Well, I shot missiles and stuff. Not many people could say that. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But I got out and I, moved to New England, which I had never lived in before, and, felt very out of place.
Yeah.
Stranger in a strange land.
Yeah. Of course, this episode is a turn and burn, is what I call it, where you interviewed me and I'm interviewing you, right?
Right.
So this is a crossover event, and that's one of the things that we talked about whenever you were interviewing me. Is I echoed a similar sentiment. I just felt like an alien in my homeland, and as we talked about on your show as well, man, that's pretty common in the clinical literature as well. So you end up going from the West Coast, which has got its own vibe, to now all of a sudden you're in the sunny New England area.
Well, all right, and there's a reason why I'm repping this hat here. And in case you had any interest, is so this Mistress Carrie is a radio personality, DJ, for a rock and roll station at the time called WAAF. And it's kind of funny when I first, because I'm a metalhead, I love heavy metal, I love rock and roll. She was one of the first voices I tuned into when I got here, because in Yuma, Arizona, our station, the only metal station was this Mexican one, like 40 miles south of the border. Yuma's right on the Mexico-California, U.S. border. And, through that time, she was very into veterans. So just a big shout out to her, because she's been a guest on my show and supported me and what I'm doing with Oscar Mike Radio. We'll get into that in a second. But music was one of the ways I kind of tried to fit into New England, because it's cold here, Ryan. It's extremely cold here. Last week it was 70 on Wednesday, and we got 18 inches of snow on Friday.
Yeah, living in Tennessee, I would not know what that's like at all. That bipolar
Most
weather.
people don't.
No.
Like, and it does something to you, Ryan. It changes you. So there was a lot of change going on in my life and trying to figure out where I fit in.
Yeah, so did you get a chance to go Oconus at all, or did you spend most of your time in the United States?
I was 100% in the United States because we were being deprecated. The military saw no reason to deploy us overseas or even put us on a boat. Sure. We got to go to North Carolina for a field op, but other than that, we were, because of what the threats were, we were primarily doing training in the desert in case they needed us to load up and go.
Now, I only ask you that because there's just another level of separation that can often accompany going outside of the country, because most Americans, I think the last figure that I saw, only about 30% of Americans have ever left the United States. So military veterans often include that 30%. And that was one of the things that definitely made me feel different was you dropping your keys?
Yeah.
Over there, whenever I experienced, like, just say Djibouti, Africa, for example, there was just so much of a stark contrast between the United States and the American life and Djibouti, Africa. And as soon as you go through an experience like that, it's really hard not to have your default settings kind of shift after that. I mean, I thought I knew what being poor was, being from East Tennessee. And then you go to a place like Djibouti, Africa, and it is just, it's just a whole new level of poverty. But I don't.
Just, if I may, I mean, I saw that in Mexico. We'd go to Algodones and northern Mexico and some of those border towns, and the thing that we came back and talked about was, wait a minute. I mean, these people are literally, 6-7 miles away from us, and the quality of life was stark. I mean, people complain about United States police officers. You did not want to get pulled over by the federales for any reason whatsoever. I mean, there was some bad stuff going on, in that part of the world at that time. And so you got a real appreciation for being an American.
Yeah. So you did get to leave the country. I mean, it may not have been
not for an op or anything.
Yeah. But the uniform didn't take you, but you've traveled outside of at least the continental United States. But I say that just generally speaking, but we can have those same experiences coming from one part of the United States into another. Like, I went from, like I said, East Tennessee to the Chicago area where our basic training is, Great Lakes, Illinois. And then from there, I went to San Antonio for A school. And then I was at iStop in San Diego. Just those 3 spots, man, my hayseed ass was never going to see the world the same. I had real Mexican food in Texas and in California. It was never going to be the same for me ever again. I had been outside of Kansas.
The Mexican food was absolutely amazing in Yuma and Mexico. I mean, the real stuff.
Right? Yeah.
Like Chipotle is not real Mexican food.
No. And neither were all the little stops that I had, like in East Tennessee. They were not real Mexican food. No. And then as soon as you have it, it's just something about experiences like that, just being exposed to it, that fundamentally change you in subtle ways that you're not necessarily aware of. So I like to unpack those type of experiences that we have in the uniform, because they're just baby steps that take us away from who we were before the uniform. And then when we try to go acclimate back to our home of records, or just back into, I'd say, this American civilian population, those feel pretty ostracizing whenever we start talking to people we've known our entire lives. Like, imagine trying to explain real Mexican food to somebody who's never had real Mexican food. They think Taco Bell is real. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, it's just, there's 1,000 little interactions that just leave you permanently changed just through military experience. And I think those are the things we like to talk about here, because we don't ever think about them. We don't put them into context along those lines. But even if it's just something like, you've been in San Diego, where are you from originally?
So I grew up in Illinois and Louisiana, and then did boot camp in San Diego.
Right. So you're making my point. You grew up in Illinois, and then you see beautiful San Diego beaches. Your frame of reference permanently shifts, man. Like, it's just, you can't go back and see, like, what Illinois in quite the same way. Yeah.
No place. I mean, and you appreciate certain things about every place that you leave, but you also, enjoy every place you get to go to. It really is. And, people's like, Americans don't leave their country. And I try to explain to some foreigners that I work with, like, I don't think you realize how big America actually is. I mean, you can be in desert in 120-degree weather and then fly 5 hours, and the high is 60 for the day. And, it's a different nation across the board.
So let me ask you, this is something that often comes up, obviously there's not a one-to-one working for missiles in the uniform to working with missiles in the civilian sector.
Yeah.
So what occupations did you try to start navigating towards after your time in the uniform? Were there sticking points? Were there, oh goodness, were there pitfalls that you had to navigate your way through whenever you changed jobs?
It was a huge dose of humility, and I didn't realize how challenging it was to get out and get a job. And this is way before the programs a lot of employers have now for military veterans. So when I got out, my first job was CVS, working in the pharmacy, and it didn't take me long to really loathe it. I mean, between certain customers wanting their Xanax and other customers wanting their Viagra, I just like, you can't, no way. I just couldn't do this. And I'd always liked computers and technology. And then I got a job working at the Division of Employment and Training, doing unemployment claims, and learned a whole lot about the New England culture by doing that job and how things worked, right? But it wasn't until I went to a school. I had gotten with my veteran service agent for the town I was in. He was a retired sergeant major in the Army. And he told me, hey, there's this program at this vet center that is a computer school for 6 months. And I didn't understand this. This is the part that I really, was scratching my head as I'm like, I worked on a missile system built by Raytheon. I got to have a piece of paper saying I went to a class for 6 months where someone will say I'm technical. I didn't get that, but I'm like, fine, I got to do this. I'll go and do it. So I did that for 6 months and graduated the class and got a job, at a headhunting company in the South Shore. And then my current employer that I've been with for over 21 years, a guy there needed some technical help, and he was a naval submariner. And he made the case that, hey, this guy doesn't have a college degree, doesn't have this, doesn't have that, but he's done this, and this. And, this is a stodgy, New England company that, is very rigid in their approach to things. They're like, are you sure he's going to work out? He's like, he's going to be fine. And that naval submariner went to bat for me in a big way. And I got into, a different role that I do now, but I was able to grow my skills because of that. So because of one other veteran looking out for another veteran, I've enjoyed a very, successful career at my current employer, and over time have been able to see them change their approach to hiring veterans. And it's been amazing.
Yeah, you hear that, Devils? Yeah, sailor hooked him up. You hear that? Yeah.
The sailor hooked me up, and let me tell you, he reminds me every now and then what the squid did for the Marine. I mean, he
Yeah.
used to. It was all good, but it was then put upon me to do that for somebody else,
Yeah.
and we have to take care of each other. We have to take care of each other.
I did one episode called The Veteran Capital, and that was just a solo episode. And that's one of the things I talked about a lot is you have to be able to plug into your most valuable resource. And our most valuable resource is each other. The shared culture that we have, the shorthand understanding of what life in the uniform is like, and the type of character that those things build are absolutely your most valuable resource in whatever comes next in life. Because just by proximity, you and I knowing each other, there are about 100 different things that I could turn to you for and go, hey, I know Travis knows a little bit about tech stuff. Maybe I can ask him about it. And it's vice versa. Those relationships are synergistic in nature. They begot more resources to you. So the more connections you have with your veteran brothers and sisters, the more opportunities, the more doors will open for you just through knowing each other. And I think that's one of the things that we often fail to grasp of just how powerful social relationships within the veteran identity actually are.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And, look, we talked before, I'm kind of like, want to be in my own lane, and I'm very comfortable being alone. But, when you need backup, or you need to know that, the guy on your right or left is going to help you out, that those relationships, those people that are better than any amount of money in the bank. It really is. Absolutely.
So let me ask you, because you did mention that whenever you interviewed me, that you prefer, I guess, a certain solitude, right? Have you been that way your entire life, or is that something that you noticed after the uniform?
No, I've been that way all my life. And even when I was in Yuma, I was the guy who, there were all my buddies passed out drunk, on a Saturday, and I'm, going to the Imperial Sand Dunes to take pictures, or, check out this, Indian reservation. And, I was completely fine playing my own little sandbox, proverbially, and having a good time doing it. Or, I went over to the Inkapa Pass in California. It's about halfway between San Diego and Yuma, and those Indians carved out these amazing, sculptures and painted them, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. So yeah, I'm pretty good.
Yeah. Well, because often I think that sometimes maybe because we feel so isolated from the civilian population, we just kind of get used to that. They're not going to get me anyway. Why even try anymore, right? Because they're not going to understand my general worldview, because it's going to be different than theirs. I just wondered if that was something that
absolutely there is an element of that within me still. Like no matter what I do, I am not going to relate to a person my similar demographic and age range who's gone through traditional, college work, career progression.
Yeah.
We just don't have that in common. It's nothing against them. They're not defective. They're not being mean or rude or whatever. It's just we have no commonality there. So it's difficult to, explain, why I tick the way I do, or, simply put, when I go to a restaurant, I scope all the access, make sure I do my internal threat assessment, and then I sit down. And that freaks some people out.
Do you still have relationships do you have friendships with people from the veteran identity as well then, or is that something that you've still preferred your solitude? Or because you mentioned something about being a motorcycle rider, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you ride with other vets, or is it just something that you do by yourself?
I pretty much go alone. I'll ride with people when the time comes, but I prefer to ride alone. It's just less variables I got to worry about, and I like the solitude. Yeah. I can hang with people, Absolutely. I can, whether it's, motorcycles or just in general, like last night, the Veterans Brotherhood MC here had a huge event. It was great going to it. But I'm also perfectly happy going to the archery range with my bow, cigar, and coffee and spending 2-3 hours just by myself and being completely fine with that.
Yeah. No, for sure. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I need a little time to myself to recharge my batteries as well. But I just wondered if that's because largely we need to interact with each other to have at least a certain bit of camaraderie after the uniform. Because I think that a lot of people, at least they express it to me, that's what they miss the most, is just hanging out with people who also understand what it's like to have to sacrifice to the level in which we have.
Well, I do it, right? I do hang out with my fellow veteran brothers and sisters. I can hang out in civilian setting with people, have a great time. Sure, fine. One of the things that is a wrinkle for me, because I don't drink, it's not because I have an addiction problem. There's a lot of reasons why I just don't do it. And so, what happens is in certain social settings, when that is the bedrock of the whole event, I get very I feel very, I'm in this group of people, they're all drinking, they're all getting sloshed or, just having a good time. And I'm not feeling it.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the things that I struggle with too. I won't say that I am completely I refuse to drink, but I just don't really enjoy it mainly because I like to go to the gym and I don't like anything impacting me the next day.
It's empty calories, man. It's empty calories.
That too, man. And it's already easy enough for me to gain weight. But I do think that that's something that's kind of changing within our demographics of veteran identities. The older guys used to get it up to the VFW and they would, pound beers together and whatnot. That is not really what the Gen Xers and below are really doing to connect with each other. They're doing things like going on motorcycle rides together. They're doing things like, going and doing physical activities to connect with each other versus just sitting around the VFW and pounding some beers and exchanging those war stories that we all are rather prone to exchange. But I guess that's one of the things that Jenna and I talked about, the millennial veteran, because that's the reason why she established her social sphere, was she had went to a VFW and noticed that the majority of the people were above the age of 55. And she was like, where the hell do I fit in here? I'm 26, right? And I guess that's one of the things that some of these organizations are going to have to start to be a little bit more flexible to, is there's a generational shift. Now we're not necessarily that enthralled with just sitting around and pounding beers and chatting about, times we had in. We want to do stuff. We're maybe a little bit more of an active generation.
It's certainly different. I think some of those veteran service organizations realize that, oops, we kind of coasted there for a while. We're getting ready to lose a whole demographic. But I can tell you, in my Marine Corps League and in local American Legion, I'm the youngest guy there, Ryan, and that's not that is not a good thing.
No.
And I'm like, guys, can we get some Xboxes donated or whatever and have a Madden night? You'd be surprised.
Oh yeah, between that and Call of Duty, man, they probably get the whole place. Yeah.
That's new and different. I'm like, well, it's not bad. Yeah. It's not bad. You could still sell beer. They'll still drink beer. We just got to get them home safe and sound. But a little Madden tournament would go a long way. And it just, I think some of them are understanding they need to retool. I hope it's in time. I really do.
Yeah. I think the image is something that they're trying to change, because you and I have talked about people we know in our personal lives that are working hard to change the image of the VFW and to cater to more, let's just say, pro-social activities, because alcohol is a mixed bag. As much as social lubricant it does have its risk, as you alluded to. there's DUIs, there's all kinds of liabilities and risks that come along with alcohol, not to mention over consumption. That's just another whole issue. But I wanted to bring up something, obviously, that we talked a little bit in the intro there about wild hearts. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? Because that's something that, we don't hear a lot about veterans and equine, I guess, approaches to therapy. So how did you get involved with Wild Hearts?
Okay, this is going to take a minute. It's a great story, so just give me some grace here, but I would absolutely love to talk about that. So kind of putting the cart before the horse, literally, I met the founder and director of Wild Hearts Therapeutic Equestrian program, Julie Lovely, through Oscar Mike Radio. And how we met is I was doing some guest DJing or guest hosting of a local show on an AM station, WVBF, in Taunton, Massachusetts. And, it was Veterans Day, and they were having, Julie in talk about her nonprofit. And I was very curious. I'm like, I have heard of dog therapy and yoga and meditation. I had never really heard of, equine assisted therapy, and wanted to find out more. And then I went out to her, facility and checked it out. And I didn't need the services per se, but watching the veterans work with the horses and watching how Julie was able to get a veteran who was nervous and very, not really confident and, had stressors in his or her life, to tune into the horse was just life-changing, Ryan. And I'm not overstating this. It's not hyperbole. It was life-changing. And so I did a show with Julie, and, we're sitting in her barn, which is really cool. I had all my equipment, mobile, and we're talking about this. And I got very interested in it and, said, this is great. How can we support this? And then about 2.5 years ago, she asked me to come on to the board of directors. And I was very humbled and honored, but yeah, I wanted to see the program work. And it goes back to the thing that we talked about previously, in private conversations in our show, is this whole action component. Here you have a civilian who is taking her experiences and her love of horses and figured out a way to take action, real quantifiable action, for veterans with PTSD or PTS with equine assisted therapy. She's done the work to become PATH certified. She has the PATH to certain specifications. She's worked with the VA. She's done all this as a civilian. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't I, as a veteran, want to support that? And so, I'd been with another nonprofit, so I kind of had some experience. And then, later I was asked to be board president. And that was very, encouraging, but also very humbling, because I had to learn to lead a different way. Certain aspects of nonprofit leadership that I hadn't done before, I had to learn how to do it. And then, we had COVID to deal with, and people were understandably concerned because, how are we going to be solvent during that time?
Yeah.
But, as we've gotten ready for 2022, our support has been very encouraging. We were always looking for people to, support us financially as we try to meet this need for veterans. And what has happened is, as we've done this, we've seen other veterans' lives change, and these veterans have then given back to the program. We were able to start a book club for veterans to prepare them for the class. We're looking to expand classes, which is why we need the financial support. And it's one thing to be, this is not a bad thing. I'm not, diminishing this. It's one thing to be on the receiving end of services. It's one thing to go to a fundraiser, give your, $20 to $100 and then go home. But it's a really different experience for me as a veteran to actually be advocating for my fellow brothers and sisters in this way. And it's been life-changing. It's been absolutely life-changing. Great respect for what Julie has done. And I tell veterans that, look, hey, if you have a civilian that is trying to do something for us all, we can't push those people away. We can't sit there and say, well, you never served, you never fired a M16, you never fired an M4, and I'm not going to let you in. I'm like, there's a lot of skills and benefits that these civilians bring to our cause. And if they're willing to, help us out, we should accept that help and use this as an opportunity to not only teach them, but also learn and get some humility and learn from what they have done. And that's happened in spades with my experience there.
So there's a few things that just queue up immediately.
Yeah, I got to talk and I get really excited, Ryan. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, just, a person doesn't necessarily have to be a veteran for you to be able to articulate your story to them, because there may actually be some value in you just articulating that story to somebody who doesn't have that shared framework. There is value in that. It's a little harder. And so therefore, it takes a little bit more emotional labor for you to walk that person through it. But there's, like I said, just a tremendous value there can be in explaining your background to somebody. So I do think that you're right. There's a certain suspicion of, well, I don't want to go this because they're not one of us. I don't want to do this because they don't get me. They're not one of us. And although I understand the sentiment, we have to understand that we're only 7% of the U.S. population. There's a lot of people who are not going to be able to understand you from that perspective. But you still have to interact with the other 93% of the U.S. population, and they are still a valuable resource, and you can cultivate them as allies into the needs of the military and the veteran community. We're not going to be able to do anything without the help of allies and vested stakeholders within our community that are not veterans.
Well, and that's one of the reasons too why, all kidding aside, I'm wearing the Mistress Carey, cap today. I wear it anyway because it's, badass and it keeps my head warm, which I need to, but because it's an example, right? She's a person who, took on, learning more about veterans causes, and throughout her, career as with WAAF, and now afterwards with her current, outreach, has been able to raise awareness and take action through several different things for veterans. And I'm like, we can't sit there and say, well, understand me, and then keep you at arm's length when it doesn't really fit for us. Mm-hmm. There's something on us veterans too to be able to make that connection, I think is what you're trying to say.
Well, yeah, and we got to be ambassadors, man.
Yes.
We got to be ambassadors for the uniform. We got to be ambassadors to other veterans. We got to be out there like moving and shaking in the space, because look, I get it. There's a lot of stereotypes out there about veterans, and you don't want to necessarily inadvertently confirm a negative stereotype. And it takes a certain amount of poise to navigate positive stereotypes as well, because those are just as heavy. Positive stereotypes, the hero worship that our culture often does, as far as the American culture, it takes a lot of management to be able to attend to those details and not feel overwhelmed by them, because it is a heavy burden to try to navigate positive stereotypes. We're not all heroes. Matter of fact, I'd say most of us wouldn't identify with the word hero, right?
No,
and our there's such a variety of types of service that you can go, or interactions that you had in the uniform. It's just not even a fair thing to say hero in the first place anyway. But to your point, if you don't act as an agent of change within the society at large, as an ambassador, all you're doing is sidelining the veteran community, because it very well could be you may be the only person that they know that served. They may say, oh yeah, my grandfather served, but they don't know this generation of veterans. And so they may be largely thinking of Vietnam era guys or Korean era guys and gals. So you have to be out there interacting and being a certain ambassador and agent of change with the society. You don't like being told, thank you for your service? Explain to them why you don't like that. Do it delicately and tactfully, because no one really wants to hear a Debbie Downer, but explain to them why maybe that's not the best interaction to have with veterans. Maybe that's, look, just say thank you for your sacrifice instead of thank you for your service. And here's the reason why. When you say service, people may feel some kind of way about it. And it alleviates the burden from them because everybody sacrifices to be in the uniform. It's just subtle changes like that if you don't like the way the society interacts with you, be an ambassador. And I know that's a hard job, but civilians largely come from ignorance. They see Hollywood representations and they think they're accurate. So we have to do what we can to dispel those bad tropes that are out there floating around about what military service is like and what military veterans are like.
Yeah, I think that's why I really do like being a part of Wild Heart's Therapeutic Equestrian program, right? I get to be an ambassador not only for the program, but also for myself and fellow veterans. And in this case, it's fellow veterans in need of help. I get to be, seeing the work done in a way that benefits other people by people who themselves admit they haven't served or were unable to serve, but they choose to serve now. I think that's one of the motivations for me to keep going with this, right? As far as the whole thank you for my service thing, at first it was really weird to me.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to get fired up. Even, I'm just going to say, well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And then I just move on. I'm like, guys, getting all fired up and yelling at civilians not going to further our cause.
No.
And whether or not you take the aspect of thank you for my sacrifice or just moving on, there's a way we can do this that, doesn't cause harm, which is what we're trying to avoid doing.
And largely I think if we're just going on the thank you for your service claim here, it's when somebody says happy birthday, it's just a pleasantry that they exchange. They may legitimately, sincerely wish you a happy birthday, but there's other people that are less sincere about it, right? There's like, oh, happy birthday. Whatever. It's not about you necessarily. Maybe it's about them. Maybe that's their virtue signaling ways in which they're walking through the world. And just to have an abrasive interaction with a civilian because they've said it, all it does is, and I've had those, by the way, I'm not being a hypocrite here, because I've been like, when somebody said thank you for your service, but it was more about where I was in my life at that time.
Yeah.
And
sure.
That's one of the things you kind of got to put in context with you whenever you're out there interacting with civilians is maybe you're having a bad day. Maybe it's not really about them. Right. So it's something I just want to kind of lightly touch on, but I wanted to ask you this, because you said that was transformative for you the first time you saw Wild Hearts. What was so transformative about it? I mean, were you talking about watching a veteran go through it, or was it something that you personally experienced?
So it was a combination of watching the veteran working with the horse. And I didn't understand that horses are prey animals, so they react differently than dogs. But it was also the sense of calm and peace, because you have to leave all that outside the paddock when you work with a horse, because horses are very tuned to what you are doing because they are prey animals. So you have to lead them in a way that involves an aspect of trust. And then, the final piece of this was watching Julie lead the class. I can't overstate enough how, wait a minute, she's a civilian, never served in the military, not really around us, but commanded complete respect and authority, not only for the horse, but the veteran going through the class. And then when you start seeing the veteran really listen to Julie and do the movements to lead the horse, it all kind of clicks in a way that, just is like, wow. And there has to be an aura of peace in order for this all to work. And you watch the veterans come there, and they none of us like going to the doctor. I certainly don't. And they come there, and that's their time with this animal to find inner peace. you can't help but be affected by it.
So that's interesting to me. So I immediately think of when we're talking about physiological responses, right? We're largely not aware of them, right? Whenever our heart rate changes, it's not like we can simply tell our heart to slow down, right? But when it comes to things of trauma specifically, or just hardcore stressors, let's just call them, there's a physiological response that accompanies them. So you can almost say they're like a dysregulated stress response, right? And it seems as if what you're describing to me is through an interaction with another social animal, like a horse, because they're a social animal as well, they're a pack animal, that you're, to facilitate the trust with the horse itself, you almost have to figure out a way to calm yourself down. Because if you're spooky, they're going to social facilitate, right? They're going to be spooky, right? If you're putting off an edgy vibe, they're going to be edgy with you, right? Because like you said, those prey animals may be more receptive to cues that you're not reading. So I'm wondering if that's what what working with horses is kind of tapping into, is just this self-imposed regulation, so that you can see that action in real time from another species.
I think it has to be, the classes start, and the first thing Julie will have the veteran do is to care for the horse, whether it's brushing them, or, looking at their hooves or whatever. And that starts the process of of facilitating, a mindset to receive instruction. She can answer that a lot better than I can. Every time I think I get this figured out, I learn something else. And, but when you see it and experience it, it's great. And then the other thing is, when we're sitting there with the veterans, is, one group does the session of instruction, the other group is watching. You start talking to these other veterans about their experiences and why they're here and what they've gotten out of it. And, when you're told, I wouldn't be alive right now without this class, I was really in a bad spot. I couldn't do this. And now 3 years later, I have my own home. I'm working, doing this, or I picked up my, paintbrush again and started creating art. We looked at it this way, when I talk to people about this, is when you look at how much a suicide costs in terms of hard dollars, it's about $1.9 million. And I could get you the link after this where I did this, but it's computed on the cost to clean up, and I'm saying that with the absolute most empathy possible from the event, right, that happened. There's cleanup involved, and maintaining and managing the event. There's a cost there, but there's also a cost in lost wages. If you're here's the numbers, right?
Lost labor, even.
Lost labor.
That person was performing a function for the society, and now they're gone.
And there is a societal loss, right? They try to quantify, what is that? Someone dies before their time because of a self-inflicted event. There is ancillary loss, not only to the community and family, but also to the greater whole, because society, that person's contributions will never be realized, right? So when you look at it in those terms, all of a sudden okay, I can figure out a way to learn how to lead in this regard, or I can sit there and understand where that person's coming from to help them out. And I think that kind of leads us to take action. I think you were absolutely right in our show, where we're tired of awareness. We need to see action here. And this is the other part that really empowers what we do, is you come to the paddock, you see what Julie and her team were doing, and you realize you're watching action. Right then, right there.
So it's been like a couple months ago now. Woo, time flies on you.
When you're having fun.
I talked to Corbett, and Corbett has his PhD in human performance, and one of his foundational research looked at physical exercise And he said, if you use moderate exercise 3 times a week, it had some therapeutic gains, right? So, because talk therapy and medication take some time to work, right? Supplementing with exercise, moderate exercise 3 times a week, saw in this very constrained, measured way, obviously, because this is research, that there was a therapeutic gain for the individuals who were engaging in moderate exercise. So I say that to say this: these things can be powerful supplemental factors to things that you're already doing to help boost your social and resiliency capital, right? So I wouldn't say that equine approaches would be the only thing that I would use, but these things may be a little bit non-traditional on the surface level, but they have some rather powerful, let's just say, force multipliers in ways that you may not necessarily see from the street level. So I say that just to say this is: be open and receptive to ideas that may seem to you a little less tried and true, because they may have some effects that are synergistic in nature to your therapy approach, to your treatment. So, and if nothing else, I know that being around people can be a bit of a mixed bag, as we've already discussed. But, there's something about connecting with, even if it's another species, just feeling connected with life in general. That may be largely what we're talking about here. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Like, I haven't done any research with it, but I think that there's something about just being present in the moment and connecting with another animal, because animals largely are present tense minded. I mean, dogs are very present in the moment. So are horses. So are a lot of animals out there. And I think there may be something that there's some reciprocal interaction that we're getting there that we're not necessarily conscious of in a scientific, empirical way. How about that?
I would agree. I would agree. I mean, I hear a lot of veterans tell me, well, there's nothing to do, and there's
Yeah.
nothing out there. And I'm like, well, I'm not saying you have to go and be on the front row, but I said, if you look hard enough, there are things you can do in our community and for the community that will get you off the couch, put the beer bottle down, and experience some life. And I think the other thing with the animals, especially the horses, is you might be having some struggles with the horse that day, but the horse is never going to judge you. The horse is never going to walk up to you and tell you that you're a failure in life because you couldn't lead me right. The horse is going to stay in there with you until you get it right. And I think that's what makes it attractive to people.
Yeah, it's unconditional, I suppose, would be the word, right?
I would say so. I mean, Julie could tell you better. You might have to have her on your show, man. I mean, she's not a veteran, but she'd be very interesting for you. I gotta do my thing here, right?
Yeah. Right.
But
Yeah.
the thing is when you see it happen, and then when you go up there yourself and just try some of the things that the classroom's teaching you, there is a powerful thing, and it has. So yeah, it has been a transformative event in my life to be a part of this.
Yeah. Is there anything that you found, like, personally, that, I mean, what did it do to you? I mean, I'm not asking you necessarily to unpack your life here, but why did you find it so powerful for you? I mean,
Well, for me, at that time, Oscar Mike Radio was just getting off the ground, different conversation. And, there were some personal things in my life that were, caused me a great deal of heartache, stress, and pain and hurt. And, for me personally, when I was around these animals, I grew up on a farm, not with horses, but, our neighbors had horses. It kind of brought me back to being a kid, around these animals that, even though the animals we rose, we ate them. In this case with horses, they were always gentle. They were always inquisitive, and they had this sense about them that, as a kid, I could never really understand. But as an adult, I'm like, okay, I'm here. I had to, get out of work mode to get here. And now I'm rubbing this animal down and looking for different things that you're supposed to look for on a horse to make sure it's healthy. And it's this sense of like when I'm on my motorcycle, or when I'm, on the weightlifting platform, where I have to put the world away to focus on what's in front of me, and this animal's in front of me, and we won't connect unless I am willing to, let my guard down.
Yeah. It's funny, like when you mentioned that about being on the platform, we did an episode with some power lifters, and they talked about that. Just that's the only thing you can do, is just be right there in that moment, respecting the weight, and just everything else just disappears and it fades into the background. Yeah. And I felt that way similar as well. Like whether I'm playing my guitar or if I'm at the gym, that it does feel just being present. And I guess largely what we're describing here is this idea of flow. And we've talked about it across a few episodes here, but flow essentially is doing something for the internal joy that it brings you. There's no extrinsic motivation. There's no money involved. It's just you're doing the thing for the sake of doing the thing. And when you engage in flow, time tends to just like fade into the background. If it's been 3 minutes, it's been 3 hours, right? It's just a certain immediacy that you're living in the moment, and you're engrossed in it, and you find pleasure in it. And those are the times in which people really convey a strong sense of well-being, not happiness, because happiness is a fickle lover. Just being connected and being appreciative for the moments that you're having in life right now. That's more what well-being is. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So, tell everybody where they can find you. Obviously, we know that we've got Oscar Mike Radio that you're a big part of, and we know that we've got Wild Hearts that you're a big part of. So, tell everybody out there in internet land where the hell they can find you. Okay,
so we'll start with Wild Hearts first, and hopefully it is a long URL. So, but it's wildheartstherapeutic.org. And we're on Facebook.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook as well. You can find us there. We're getting an Instagram and TikTok going. And, periodically Julie will post pictures of the class or of the little mini. She's got 2 mini horses that are really cool. They're a handful. It's really cool to see them in play. And then, again, I met Julie through my show, Oscar Mike Radio. And that website is oscarmikeradio.com. You can find me on Facebook. I put out a show every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, we had talked about having a purpose, and that show really, opened up so many opportunities and occasions to add value to something that, went way beyond just a podcast.
Right.
And it's with great humility that I just feel humbled and honored to be a part of these things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, podcasting is one of those things that it's a lot of work. Obviously, as we talked about, it is a ton of work, but there is a bit of joy and satisfaction that comes out of it whenever you're engrossed in doing it. So I echo that. It's a lot of work, though. A lot of work. A lot of people out there may feel like they can just jump into it, and you can, but be prepared to be a little bit more engrossed in it than you realized. Yeah.
Well, anything worth doing is worth doing right. You don't have to have a high-end studio and high-end equipment, although a good equipment makes a big difference. But, I feel that there's a real sense of satisfaction when I've talked to somebody much like yourself, and I learned something that I didn't know before, got exposed to a viewpoint that I wouldn't have gotten exposed to otherwise. Or, a real bonus is, we have a veteran starting their own business, or they have really rebooted their life, right?
Right.
and I get that one message or several times from a family member saying, I learned more about my brother, sister, husband, wife from your show. I learned something from your show that I didn't know before. And I'm like, yes, that's what we're going for here. Or, a veteran will say, what, we did your show and all of a sudden we got some sales from our product. This is awesome. It's those intangible things you can't really put into a metrics grid that make it all worth it.
Yeah, I'll try to put it into a metric. I will. But yeah, you're right. There is that's one of the things that I can't express as much. I am really humbled every single time I get reached out by somebody who says that how much the content means to them. And I don't know, to your point, if you can really quantify that. I just know that it definitely gives me the inspiration to keep going here, despite all the hours of editing that often occur.
So I look at something like this to quantify, because I get asked all the time, and I've seen other colleagues or peers rather in the world, who will time their drops on certain other metrics they've done. And so I've got it down to this, Ryan. I'm like, look, all I care about is the number one. I have one person or subject that I'm talking about. If it's a person, I want that one person to feel comfortable and safe in this space to talk to me about what, their story is, right? And then if one person, the last time I hit upload or publish, whatever that time is in the future, if I can, do that and know that one person got positively impacted by Oscar Mike Radio, then it was all worth it. And once I start having that mindset, I'm not really worried about, hitting some kind of arbitrary number target in my show.
Yeah. No. I mean, I largely was kidding. I was just.
Maybe you weren't, but I just want to tell you where my background was. Yeah.
The obviously the social scientist in me is trying to metric everything out, right? That was the joke.
We're human beings, and human beings are. If we could metric it all out, where would humanity be? We would just, that number is going to do that, so we're just going to input that, and they'll all, follow the little, it'd be like, we wouldn't need to have Pavlov's chicken to, understand humanity then.
Oh, Pavlov's chicken? Oh, you mean the dogs? Oh, okay.
Dog. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Maybe he was using chicken with the dogs, and that's what was making. Oh, I was kidding. Yeah, no, I get it. I'm largely making a joke, man. I'm just being silly.
Sure.
But in our social science sphere, man, we're not satisfied until all the mystery of the world has been removed. That's what we're out there trying to do. We want to be able to explain everything. But
don't we know it all already?
No,
we don't.
Not at all. No way, man. Yeah, the scientific community for us, man, we are always like, that's why we never say this is prove. We never say prove. We say support. It is supported in this and supported in that, because we leave in that room for error and new information. Always.
How did Newton do it with the apple falling for gravity then?
You have to talk to somebody who has a little bit more of a mathematical background than me, man.
I'm just saying. I mean, it's always interesting, but you're always right, though. I mean, and it has to be something like we as humanity, as society, as civilizations. There's so many different civilizations, cultures, subcultures that you could be spending an eternity on this, right?
Well, like I said, we're never going to be happy until we've removed all the mystery.
Well, I like a little mystery, Ryan. I like a little mystery, but yeah. I also like hitting upload and knowing, like, wait a minute, I think I got a good one here, or wow, I did not know that before, and I'm always reminded and humbled about how little I actually know. Like I'm like, not that I'm a dummy, at least I don't think I am, but I really don't know that much.
Well, yeah, that's actually what we mean by trying to remove the mystery. Is we understand that there are so many limitations to our knowledge, And that is the pursuit to fill in those gaps as much as we can, is the thrilling pursuit of science. We want to explain as much as the natural phenomenon that happens in the world as possible. And that's why it's thrilling to even find the null, to find something that you didn't find, right? That is just as meaningful as finding something to the positive, right? It's just, finding something that happened that you didn't expect is what we all live for, right? Yeah.
So we are doing it through podcasting.
Kind of. We're in the Wild West, right? It's the Wild West. But
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're up here at the hour mark, man. Is there anything that you feel like we didn't get to today?
I mean, there's a ton of stuff we can talk about in the future. Would love to come back on your show. I've had a great time doing this. I don't get interviewed that often, so I really want to thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk with you, and love what you're doing, Ryan.
Of course. Likewise, my friend. Likewise. So if you've enjoyed the conversation we've had here with Travis and his life after the uniform and his adventures with Oscar Mike Radio and the Wild Hearts Foundation, and you feel like there's somebody out there who would benefit from hearing this episode, please spread the word. Largely what we do here relies upon the good nature of our listeners spreading the work that we do here. If there's a particular episode that you would like to have come to fruition here on Vet with a Mic, please reach out to me across all the social media platforms or at ryan@vetwithamic.com, and I will do my best to make it happen, because I live to serve here on Vet with a Mic. But as always, however life finds you, hope life finds you well. Till next time.